To understand the Karabinek was at 1929, we must first understand the situation of Poland after World War I. In 1918, after 123 years of partition, Poland re-emerged as an independent state. But independence came with a serious problem. The Polish army was a patchwork force armed with weapons inherited from three former occupying empires: Germany, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. Polish soldiers carried German Mausers, Austrian Mannlichers, and Russian Mosin-Nagants, often using incompatible ammunition and spare parts. This logistical chaos made standardization a national priority. Poland's military leadership quickly recognized the Mauser system as the most practical foundation for a standardized rifle. It was robust, accurate, and already familiar to many Polish soldiers. Early Polish service rifles, such as the WZ-98 and WZ-98A, were direct derivatives of German designs. However, by the late 1920s, Poland needed something more refined, especially for its highly mobile cavalry formations, which remained an important element of Polish military doctrine. The Karabinek Mauser 1929, often abbreviated as WZ-29, was developed as a short rifle rather than a full-length infantry musket. It was intended to replace older carbines and long rifles with a single, more versatile weapon. Production began at the State Arms Factory in Radom, officially known as Fabryka Broni w Radomiu, which would later become one of Europe's most respected arms manufacturers. Although heavily inspired by the German Gewehr 98 and Karabiner 98 variants, the WZ-29 was not a simple copy. Polish engineers introduced several modifications to improve handling, durability, and compatibility with Polish tactical needs. At its core, the Karabinek WZ-1929 was a bolt-action rifle chambered in 7.92 by 57mm Mauser, the same cartridge used by German forces. Key specifications included action, Mauser pattern bolt action with controlled round feed, magazine, internal 5-round stripper clip-fed magazine, barrel length, approximately 600mm, overall length, shorter than standard infantry rifles, weight, roughly 4 kilograms unloaded. The rifle featured a turned-down bolt handle, making it more comfortable to operate from horseback or prone positions. The rear sight was a tangent-style sight graduated for long-range fire, reflecting the pre-war emphasis on marksmanship and volley fire. The stock was made from hardwood and featured a distinctive flat butt plate, as well as side-mounted sling swivels, another nod to cavalry use. One notable design feature was the full-length handguard, which helped protect the shooter's hands during sustained fire. Fit and finish were generally excellent, reflecting Radom's high manufacturing standards. Despite popular imagery, Polish cavalry in 1939 did not fight with sabres alone. In reality, they were mounted infantry, trained to ride to the battlefield and then fight dismounted using modern firearms. The Karabinek WZ-1929 was well suited to this role. Its shorter length made it easier to carry on horseback, while its full-powered cartridge allowed cavalry units to engage targets at the same effective ranges as regular infantry. In addition to cavalry, The WZ-29 was also issued to selected infantry units, border protection troops, and military police and internal security forces. By 1939, it was one of the most common rifles in Polish service, though it never fully replaced older Mauser variants due to production limits. The defining moment for the Karabinek WZ 1929 came in September 1939 during Germany's invasion of Poland. Polish soldiers armed with WZ-29 rifles faced overwhelming odds, superior German armor, air power, and coordinated mechanized tactics. Despite this, Polish infantry and cavalry units frequently demonstrated high levels of discipline and marksmanship. In defensive engagements, the WZ-29 proved accurate, reliable, and durable. Polish troops used it effectively in ambushes, urban fighting, and delaying actions against German infantry. However, the rifle, like most bolt-action firearms of the era, was ultimately outmatched by Germany's combined arms doctrine rather than by enemy small arms alone. After Poland's defeat, large numbers of Karabinek WZ 1929 rifles were captured by German forces. The Wehrmacht redesignated them as Gewehr 298 and issued them primarily to rear echelon units, occupation forces, and training formations. German soldiers generally respected the rifle's quality, noting that it was essentially a well-made Mauser with minor national differences. Some rifles were modified to accept German sling hardware or sight adjustments. Others were passed on to Germany's allies or auxiliary forces. One of the most important chapters in the WZ-29's history came after Poland's occupation. Many rifles were hidden, buried, or smuggled away by Polish soldiers and civilians. These weapons later reappeared in the hands of Polish resistance fighters, including the Home Army or Armia Krajowa. Although ammunition shortages and lack of spare parts limited their use, the WZ-29 became a symbol of armed resistance. It was used in sabotage operations, ambushes, and ultimately during the Warsaw Uprising of 1944. In these conditions, the rifle's mechanical simplicity and rugged construction proved invaluable. Like many weapons associated with Poland's 1939 campaign, the Karabinek WZ 1929 is surrounded by persistent myths. One common rumor claims that Polish rifles were outdated or inferior. This is demonstrably false. The WZ-29 was comparable in quality and performance to contemporary German and Czech rifles. Another myth ties the rifle to the famous and inaccurate story of Polish cavalry charging tanks with rifles and sabers. In reality, cavalry charges were conducted against infantry, and rifles like the WZ-29 were central to those engagements. There is also a collector rumor that the WZ-29 was more accurate than the German Karabiner 98K. While individual rifles may vary, there is no credible evidence that the Polish rifle was inherently superior, only that it was well made and consistent. After World War II, surviving Karabinek WZ 1929 rifles saw limited service. Some were used briefly by post-war Polish forces before being replaced by Soviet-designed weapons. Many rifles were scrapped, exported, or lost to history. Today, surviving examples are highly sought after by collectors, particularly those with original Polish markings and matching serial numbers. More importantly, the WZ-29 stands as a reminder of Poland's determination to defend its independence with modern arms, professional soldiers, and domestic industry, even in the face of overwhelming aggression. The Karabinek Mauser 1929 was not a revolutionary weapon. It did not change the course of the war, nor did it introduce groundbreaking technology. What it did represent was competence, resilience, and national effort. In the hands of Polish soldiers in 1939 and resistance fighters in the years that followed, the WZ-29 proved itself to be a reliable and effective rifle, one worthy of recognition alongside the more famous firearms of World War II. And in remembering it, we also remember the soldiers who carried it into history's first and darkest chapter of the Second World War.